Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. Here we are on a Monday morning, very early. We're having some technical difficulties. I'm not sure my brain is going, but my guest is on fire here. Her name is Carola Jain, and she is the CMO of Spartan. If you haven't heard of Spartan, you probably will because they have some incredible ambitions. One of the things that, oh, by the way, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting in your background is that you were at Interbrand for 16 years and then made the jump. What is it at your experience at Interbrand that prepared you to be a chief marketing officer?
Yeah, so I started at Interbrand in the brand valuation group, and I think that definitely set me up for being very comfortable with looking at financials and working very closely with the CEO and CFO of any organization. And I really understood early on what the struggle was for the chief marketing officer, because we would either be hired by the CFO or by the CMO, and you could always see that the angle that they brought to the table was very different. I think the CMO was always saying, well, my financial team doesn't understand why I want to spend on XYZ, so help me make that case. And I think the CFO would say, well, I don't really understand what of these actions is creating value. I know that obviously there's things that I as a CFO don't necessarily need to get involved with, but help me kind of prioritize and really understand that. So from the brand valuation methodology, I think it was interesting to look at, how does the customer, the consumer choose your brand right now? What's the percentage? So how important is your brand in that decision-making process, which then proportionately also sort of sets you up what should you be spending on. And then looking at the future and your revenues in the future, what percentage or how strong is your brand and how likely, therefore, your brand is to generate those revenues in the future. So the brand strength score gets translated into a discount rate, and the role of brand gets translated into that percentage out of your revenue that we attribute to your brand. So I think taking a step back, it definitely set me up from a brand valuation perspective to understand that not every CFO is going to understand immediately what you want to spend on, and you really need to take the financial side to outline that. And then as I moved into brand strategy, I think also, looking at a large boardroom or looking at just a very senior management group where everybody has their own hats on, it's important to outline a really long-term vision, but also be very tactical in the short term. So I think everybody, at least at Spartan, is looking at daily ticket sales, monthly and annual ticket sales. So how does everything I do on a daily basis translate into that, while still keeping this long-term vision of hopefully everybody that is listening to this one day would know what Spartan is. Right now, probably not. But I'm saying in the future, how do you create and communicate that long-term brand vision while still being accountable and driving revenue on a daily basis?
So the one thing about Interbrand is that it is very well known for it's done a very good job branding itself related to the brand valuation. It's like they own the idea, which is impressive indeed. And one comment I wanted to make, I was talking to a CMO, and I can't mention the name or the company, but she told me this story, which was mind-boggling, how this one company was bought by venture capital, moved over. They changed the names of all, this was $1.5 billion company. They changed the name to the new brand. Sales dropped literally 70%. And here's the kicker. CMO comes in and goes, oh my God, look at the sales rate. Puts the name back on the products and sales recover. If ever there was an active demonstration of brand, that was it. But people don't seem to recognize it. And how could a CFO somehow not be aware of stories like that?
Yeah, I think when you're not close to, what we would call maybe more the fuzzy part of it. Now, I guess in this case, the name is definitely not fuzzy, but I think it's hard to really oftentimes attribute digital marketing, spending money and, acquiring customers digitally seems to be a way that you really see, okay, I spent X on Facebook and I got Y ticket sales, for example. But we oftentimes also look like it's not just that, right? There's a whole number of things that make the stew, as our CEO would say. And it could be top of the funnel awareness. It could be television. It could be radio ads. It could be field sales, like people on the ground. And all of those things together then make you more likely to click on that ad that you see. So oftentimes I think it's misunderstood that, yes, one change in itself, the one you mentioned is very dramatic, but one little change may not immediately bring your revenue down. But when you do a lot of those things and don't necessarily think it through, you can have a large unforeseen consequence.
So one of the things that we talk a lot about with our clients is the importance of consistency. Talk a little bit about that and why that is. Oftentimes a new CMO comes onto the job and says, well, that's not my story. I'm going to create a new story. And that's sometimes a step backwards for brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to the Interbrand brand valuation methodology, consistency was very important. And now looking at my job at Spartan, definitely consistency is important, since you have to put yourself in the shoes of the customer or the consumer. They're being bombarded or seeing so many different messages. And even when we as the brand team, as the marketing teams think, oh, this has been in market, we've spent X on it, the customer may just begin to understand where we're going with this. So it's incredibly important to really outline that, and then not only look at the endpoint, like the customer or the big ads that you're doing, but also look at your employees and really understand, have they fully embraced it, or are they thinking, hey, this is the new CMO coming in, latest kind of trend of the month, and I'm going to just keep my head down and basically ignore it. So where I think both on the Interbrand side as well as on Spartan, while it's very different types of clients or very different types of brands, we really see when the employees buy into it and when they recite that elevator pitch and when they understand where you're trying to go with this, they then communicate that to their customers and clients. And that's the way that a brand comes to life. If you then have very strong ads or very strong marketing in market alongside, that obviously strengthens it. But oftentimes you are just putting lipstick on the pig if you sort of have a beautifully branded bus out there that, screams your message in a TV spot. But then when you talk to the company, when you reach out, when you look at all the different touch points, it's nothing like what was promised.
Yeah, we call that the new paint, a coat of paint on an old barn. We talk a lot about employees, and I didn't pay Carola to say that here. We did some research, 110 B2B CMOs, asked them how important employees were in the communication process. 80% said really important. But then when we asked how long they spent before launching a new campaign, and it was maybe 1 to 2 months, actually less than 70% spent more than 2 months. But we know, and one of the conversations I had a while back with Edelman from Aetna, he spent 6 months retraining employees because they were making a new promise. And in order to make that new promise real, you have to get employees involved. So in the research that you did at Interbrand, how did you actually was there a way of measuring employee engagement?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have internal employee surveys right now where you really understand how is the brand trickling down, how does everybody understand how important the brand is. And, from my experience at Interbrand, when it comes from the top down, when the senior leader is most engaged, and really every time we had a CEO hire Interbrand or be really involved and be in many of the milestone meetings, that's when the project had the most success. Because I think in the end, everybody looks to the top and says, these guys really bought in, or these women really bought in. And if they're not, then, it's just the flavor of the month. So it is important to set an example. And then from the Spartan side, I also think it's very important to explain what I'm trying to do to each individual vertical, because when I first came on board and we were talking about wanting to become a lifestyle brand, there were a lot of people that said, okay, that might be your big vision, but what does that mean to me on a daily basis when I'm physically doing the analytics or when I'm doing XYZ? And so we have to, and I think that's where the Interbrand training sort of came in very handy. You really have to put yourselves into that specific job and understand, how do you now translate what this brand means to those people? And that's a lot of the work that we ended up doing at Interbrand for big repositioning or positioning engagements. How does that now make sense for the head of asset management that frankly is on a completely different trajectory and is not necessarily thinking about brand, or the head of fixed income, or anybody in the procurement, or anybody in production of something. So it's really important to understand what are the things that would be different with this new brand positioning. How are they going to go to market? How are they talking to their customer, to their employees? And ultimately, I think Spartan being such a strong sort of badge brand, for us, it's always interesting to really understand, how does our brand positioning bring us together and make us really create this rallying cry for the organization.
So one of the things that you mentioned is CEOs, and that comes up in a lot of episodes, that you really, as a CMO, have to pick your CEO very carefully, because you simply can't succeed without their support, but their commitment to marketing as being an important part of the brand. I want to just sort of, before we take a break, just talk about the transition that you had and how you prepared yourself, or how you jumped into the job, because they're very different roles.
Yes, they're very different roles, and I wasn't really able to prepare myself. I just jumped in. But I did do a 6 months consulting stint. So I came in on a freelance basis, and I particularly worked on Spartan women and how we can communicate that we are a truly co-gender sport, and that we almost have 50-50 female and male participation. So I started working with that. Through that, really understood what the company had to offer, and also from a marketing and brand perspective, how much I was able to potentially unleash. So that gave me a good framing of what the opportunity is. And in terms of really being prepared, I feel like, if you're in a fast-moving business, and I like to say we're a 10-year-old startup, because, we have added a huge merchandise business. We have added a large sponsorship business where, we have a lot of B2B companies that or larger companies, not B2B, that are now sponsoring our events and, creating a better customer experience in order to then, be associated and have a little bit of that equity transfer. So from my perspective, just having that training from Interbrand was helpful. But then I started doing a customer call a day. And I think, again, going back to what I did at Interbrand, when we had large assignments, I always really participated in the stakeholder interviews. And I really felt that gave me a seat across the table from the CEOs or CFOs or CMOs that I was talking to. Since, you get thrown into a project, specifically in consulting work, and oftentimes you were not necessarily an expert in that industry 3 months ago. And then, you speak to all the analysts, or you really read up on the industry, but the one thing that nobody can take from you is the customer interview. And that's something that I've actually noticed at Interbrand not many people were doing. So oftentimes you had then, a rather refined point of view on what could be done better with the customers. And people were really thinking that was, quite a unique perspective. So now being at the company, I definitely want to own that unique perspective. And yeah, we have a lot of people in the field talking to our customers every day. So it's not just the one-on-one qualitative customer interview, but it's also going into our social media communities and asking questions there, speaking to our field team, our production team. So we do have a very good feedback loop, but still being able as a CMO to pick up the phone. And I normally go through a list and look at a business problem I have and really try to understand, okay, if I could fix one thing here, I think that would really create a larger impact. So I try to understand what is that one business problem, and then ask our head of BI to give me a few names that are in our database that I could be calling, and then really follow up with those people in detail. So again, it's qualitative, and if I think there needs to be a bigger follow-up, I'll do a quantitative study afterwards. But I really enjoy and have learned a lot.
Perfect. Great place for us to take a break. We'll be right back.
Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2
of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing. Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now, for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now let's get back to the show. All right, we're back. And I thought it was really important. I want to emphasize this. You make the calls personally. And I know that there are a few CMOs that I've talked to who have done the same. Ian Howells, who was CMO of Sage Intech, talked about how before they go into a micro market, they do 25 to 50 interviews. He also personally does the interviews, and then he trains people to do the interviews. And of course, as someone who worked at Interbrand, you were trained to do that. So that's just a really great place to start. I'm curious, what were some of the things that you learned in some of those interviews that you were then able to sort of apply or fix or whatever?
Yeah, I've actually learned a lot of very interesting things, and from my perspective has then enabled me to build new products or to strengthen existing products based on that insight. So just to give you one example, I called a customer that was on our largest team leader customer base, and I just wanted to basically thank him for bringing 50 people on average to the races. And turns out that he is an employee at a large telecommunications company, and he said, look, I have risen the ranks in my company by being the guy that makes people do things that they weren't thinking they could do. So I now, go to market, or I would go to work, and people ask me like, hey, when is the next time that you're doing a Spartan race? I want to come with you. And so he said he actually got a seat on the senior leadership team through that, or he was able to really meet people way above his current position because those people now also race with him, or they see him as a leader where they can say, take this group and spend 3 months with them, sort of help them prepare for the race, and then take them out. So that was definitely a very interesting learning for me to see that Spartan as a platform is really helpful for corporates, where everybody's looking for an opportunity to bring their employees together, create team bonding exercises. And so looking at that as a way to really, how do I strengthen that offering? Like, yes, we know we have corporate teams sign up, but what can I do to make that guy's job or, passion point easier? And so one of the things that he said is, I would like to have a t-shirt. I'd like to have swag. I'd like to have emails that I can easily forward to people. And so I think when you look at it from the brand's perspective, we're like, yeah, it's all there. But he didn't see that. And he, on a daily basis or monthly basis, recruits 50 people to come to our races. So from that perspective, it was definitely very helpful to work with him directly. And the other thing that I feel like people will see, even when I call lapsed customers, which, obviously I do, try to understand why did you do X races or what made you not come back, it's always very interesting, and people are so grateful to even get a call, just having their voice heard. So I feel like oftentimes we as the brands underestimate the power of a phone call and just listening to somebody, even if we feel might be a single incident. More than often, almost every time, I've really heard that, there's a lot of nice insights in there that I can then extrapolate and build a mini case study around.
Well, what I heard, which was so interesting, is that if you are a Spartan advocate, you might get promoted faster because it shows that those characteristics of the Spartan brand are important to business. I think that's really, really fascinating. And I'm wondering, talk a little bit about this as a badge brand and what that means. And I mean, the fact that you could actually help someone with their career is amazing.
Yeah, so we definitely know that, in business, from all the listeners I think would agree, oftentimes you look for people that have played team sports or that have excelled in sports, maybe during college or, in their earlier years. So I think what we find is that those people are able to build teams, get consensus, and sort of get everybody marching in the right direction. But also those are people that had to multitask. If you're playing sports in college, you had to manage your sports career as well as your academic career. So oftentimes we know that those are the characteristics that everybody's looking for in a strong team leader. And so bringing that back at a non-college age is very important. And we find that there's a lot of senior leaders or leaders in organizations that, want to take that step. They, outside the work, are then able to really create these strong teams, and that they get noticed in their organizations. It gives them another dimension. And I think what we're seeing from just the general teams is a very nice alternative to just basically taking people out for drinks. As we're looking at the whole wellness aspect becoming much more important in the corporate life, what type of employee would one rather have? Somebody who's not taking care of themselves and who is not really able to be in a competitive environment, or somebody who, really enjoys kind of the challenge and, has a larger team that they can come to the race with. So we've really seen that. I have to stop this. I was going nowhere.
Okay, no problem. All right, So this is one of the ways that what's so interesting to me is, how do you know when you really have a strong brand? And I think when you have a strong brand, one, when people want to wear your brand, but two, what was so interesting here is that this individual who wore the Spartan brand and became recognized as a leader, how powerful that was. And it's almost like you could market this as a way of building corporate culture.
Yes, 100%. And I think I wrote a LinkedIn article about it, and I got a lot of suggestions from people where they say, I wish my company would be doing this. I wish my company would give us other ways of A, showing that you're a leader in your community, and B, bringing that wellness aspect to work. I feel like in this day and age, everybody's looking for an ability to combine, working out and, having mental and physical wellness. And this is an opportunity where we as an employer are now saying, not only do we give you free food or free swag, but also we help you become a better person physically and mentally, and we help you push beyond what you thought was possible. So with this specific individual, he has very tangible proof points, and he's actually shown me comments when he then reposted something from his boss's boss that was saying, you have been a true shaper of our culture. You've brought teams one notch up. And he really felt that he was able to push his whole company that way. One of our clients, Rakuten, has actually participated, I think now 800 and some employees in 24 different races. And they have fully embraced it to the point that their senior leadership team at our World Championship in Tahoe last weekend all participated in one of the hardest races. So they've definitely identified this as a way to really bond over something. And they're now bringing their clients. So they brought their Barney's clients. They brought different media clients. And they said, when you're on the course and you sort of see each other struggle or you see each other push, you really then, when you meet on a Monday morning by the water cooler, have a very different relationship. And it's sort of that twinkle in the eye and, seeing each other vulnerable, which I feel like a lot of the marketing conversation now is about how you show vulnerability as a leader. It's definitely very impactful, specifically if you have to, or if you're managing millennials who are looking for that, bring your whole human to work and don't just show up as the boss and make me do things.
Bring your whole human to work. So let's, we talked a little bit about badging and the importance of this. And I think one of the indications of this, your brand is, I think, there are 20,000 Spartan folks that have worn their tattoo. So, which brings us to an interesting question, because Tim Yeaton from Red Hat revealed his tattoo on the show. Are we going to see yours anytime soon?
Yeah, right here. Not quite. I have a few peel-on tattoos that my daughter has put on my arm. But we're very proud. And I think, again, having worked at Interbrand and having looked at Harley Davidson, which is now a client, it's interesting to see when you have a brand that has such affinity that there are roughly 20,000 people that have a tattoo. And that's because not necessarily that they're all tattoo lovers, but the brand is transformational, and there's so many stories that we have of why people have their tattoos. And so having a badge brand and being a steward of a badge brand really gives you a large opportunity, but also makes you think different about how do you communicate that that brand, because people want to be associated with something bigger than themselves. And again, in the workplace, if you're the guy or the woman that is the Spartan and you invite people into your group, that is powerful. If you're with your children, and as a mom specifically, when I do these races, my kids look at me differently, for sure. They all of a sudden think like, oh, you're strong and you're pushing yourself, and they like that. And I think as something to do on the weekends for people, that they definitely love it. So how do we put our warriors into sort of an outfit or armor out there? Like, what do we give them that they feel that, they have an easy way when people come up to them to talk about it? And I feel like as we see digital communications and emails and social just becoming more and more part of our lives, having these real life experiences on the course with people. Obviously, you can post it afterwards. It's a good postable or Instagrammable moment, but having real experiences with real friends definitely shows us is a huge impact of why, or a factor of why Spartan has grown so fast. And being real and not having to put lipstick on the experience, like it's definitely. The experience is not what Spartan says it is, it's what the individual makes out of it. And we always feel you might not like, while you're on the course, you might have a hard time, or, obviously it's difficult, but at the end, you'll know at the finish line. And every single one of the people that have done the race feel that something changes. When you physically push yourself over a boundary in life and on the course, afterwards you look back and you say, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought, and I've learned something from it.
Amazing. So social has come up, and for B2B brands, social is really tricky. But one of the areas and opportunities is with employees. And what's interesting here is a lot of, you talk about corporate teams and so forth. And it seems like that would create a lot of great social opportunity for these B2B brands. And being a participant, giving them, as you called it, giving them something that would be Instagrammable. Talk a little bit about the role of social in your brand, and then a way for B2B brands to be thinking about social.
Yeah, for us, social is very important. Like, we're definitely a brand that was built on social, and makes my job pretty easy because our customers are very social savvy and they want to post their experiences. So we don't use models. We don't really have shoots. We just use the user generated content. And I think that's the nice thing. As I was saying before, you don't have to put lipstick on the pig. There's no experience that we need to create to then make people believe. It's pretty much the expression and this transformation that people want to share. But how that then translates into a B2B brand and into the workplace, it's definitely, again, saying this, you want to bring your human to work, you want to make the experience at work meaningful. Spartan gives an opportunity for brands to attach themselves to that mission. Like, we want to change 100 million people's lives. And obviously, one by one, that's very difficult. But if a company comes on board and says, I want to partner with you like Rakuten, and I make this experience available to my employees, and they then rally and they create their little teams and they go out. And now I think in London, they're doing the Rakuten Cup, where they have different countries in Europe all come to Twickenham and compete together. That's a great experience. Then they can take the corporate suite afterwards. They can do, drinks and food, and their families can watch. So it's an opportunity to bring your family, bring different people to a work situation that otherwise would have been very isolated. So we really see that as being the opportunity for social for B2B companies, because now they talk about their employees as being gritty, as being forward thinking, and as being really leaders in their environment. And I think we're seeing a lot more companies, very large companies, coming to us and saying, yeah, we used to do golf outings, we used to do partner dinners, but people are looking for something else. And, we want to be inclusive to everyone. So what can we do that gives everybody the opportunity to push sort of at their level?
Perfect. Well, that's a great place for us to take a break. We'll be right back.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
All right, we're back. And one of the things that you mentioned in the last segment was that your purpose is to impact 100 million lives. What I love about that, one, is how succinct it is. Two, how bold it is. And I'm curious, as a purpose-driven organization, how does that permeate and help you as the CMO do your job?
Yeah, so we're looking at the purpose really was set by Joe DeSena, the CEO, and it makes, again, my job easier because, he does think big, but, obviously we need to be rooted in how many tickets we sell, but it gives us an opportunity to diversify our revenue streams also, because 100 million people are probably not going to run through obstacle course racing. But very early on, I think he looked at this, and again, I think his whole idea was pretty much born out of being on Wall Street, having to take people out for entertainment purposes, and really saying that's not how people want to be entertained. That doesn't get me closer to people, getting them out and drink. So he very early on asked people to participate in a half marathon. And he thought, and he saw, when he saw people's lives change, because they said, there's no way I can do this. And he asked them to get up early and run with him. Out of this, you really saw that he created these really strong bonds with people. And so he said, little by little, he started a whole company that was based on like different length and different difficulty levels. But as we're looking at how do we change 100 million lives, one being a badge brand merchandise. So if everybody that puts on our shirts becomes kind of a walking advertisement for us and for that Spartan lifestyle, then it gets more awareness to people. So that's already great because our customers are so avid and they want to share the message because, again, it has transformed their lives. And then looking at where wellness is going and this sort of extreme wellness niche that we really own, how do we communicate that to people? The body, the mind, and the spirit, like how does all of that get, our philosophy really get communicated? And we're starting a whole online education platform where we bring this thinking to people because we realize not everybody, is able right now to get out there and challenge themselves on a course, but being a Spartan doesn't just mean you have to run a Spartan race. When you commuted in this morning, there was probably an escalator and a stair. The Spartan would take the stair. And so if you then count all those steps, that changes your life. When you have the donut versus the, apple in front of you, if you take the apple, it definitely makes you more Spartan. So all of those little shifts we think are incredibly important in the workplace, and having Spartan as a badge brand really then helps people to latch on to this versus just, my New Year's resolution. So we want to give employers and companies a suite of products that they can give to their employees to really help kind of push themselves and adopt a healthier lifestyle.
I'm definitely not feeling very Spartan today. Since we had to record at 9 a.m., I chose not to ride a bike to work. Instead, I took the subway. I had a double espresso with some pretty thick almond milk. And yesterday, I think I had bacon. So not feeling Spartan, but we'll be working out tomorrow. Anyway, I'm curious, we've talked a lot about brand, but every CMO listening, particularly the B2B ones, know that they can't just do brand. They have to do demand gen. And you really didn't have any experience in that area per se. How did you sort of learn the mechanics of that, and how do you balance brand versus demand?
Yeah, so I think one of your guests, Thomas Barta, mentioned in his interview with you that you have to prioritize and you have to create these value creation zones. So I think from my perspective, most CMOs, I don't think, can be good at everything that they're doing. So number one was definitely bring in the right people and have very strong talent. And I very much firmly believe in A's hire A's and B's hire C's. And so I really want to have a team that can challenge me, or that, in many instances is even stronger than me in specific areas. So bringing in people that are very strong in digital, very strong in, just all parts that make our business tick was my number one priority. And now looking at, the difference, again, from consulting to being on the brand side is there are just a lot of different priorities. So how do I create not only a 2020 vision, but also a priority on a daily basis? Like, what do I work on? What's going to move the needle most? And then how do I have the strongest possible team address those issues?
So, perfect. It's sort of good to great. Get the team first, fill in the gaps. That takes a certain amount of self-awareness. As you were talking, and I recently had a guest who talked about having a 98% attribution ability. In other words, they felt at this point in time they could track every dollar down to like the last 2%. Where do you think you are with that? I mean, that's a very tricky area, but have you thought about attribution modeling? Do you have a pretty clear sense of what works and what doesn't in terms of, and we could just start with generating demand or, filling up seats at the races.
Yeah, so I think we definitely work very closely with the CFO and his team, and that has been helpful. So we know how much it costs us to acquire a customer if we had to spend that money right now to fill all the seats. However, our marketing budget, again, back to your attribution, there's other factors that, create organic ticket sales and organic merchandise sales. So what are all of those things? And I think it's, in my seat, it would be very difficult to say we have it down to a 98% attribution. But I think you want to know, if I need to sell these 5,000 tickets in these next 3 months, this is how much it's going to cost me. And I can go to my finance team and say, if this needs to happen, I need X dollars. I think where it becomes more of a stew, as our CEO would call it, is when you look at, everything is, we have 250 local events. Each local market is very different. The coasts are very different than, the middle of America. And then if you look at Italy as being very different even from Germany, based on the competitive landscape. So we have to create a perfect marketing mix that really is applicable to that market, depending on how long we've been in the market, what have we seen works, who are the influencers that we can really bring in, and even to this point, like how many teams do we have on the ground that we can kind of incentivize. Since I always believe, and that's sort of one of the shifts that we're looking to make, is if I can incentivize or reward an individual who is fully heartedly in it and wants to, create good through racing and bringing family and friends in, I'd rather give those people an incentive or reward than paying it to a digital platform, since that digital platform only gets me so much, specifically if you're a mission-based brand. So yeah, I think, are we 100% at attribution? No. But if push comes to shove and we say, in order to make X, I need to do, these 5 things, we're pretty much there. And I think on the local level, specifically, as I feel like in our business specifically, we've relied so much on digital, the more we can kind of turn it back and say, digital can only get you so far. Yes, it can get you a ticket sale at, let's say, $25, but on the other hand, it doesn't give that brand texture. So that brand texture gets communicated. We're very successful recently by doing free workout tours. So if I can pop up and get 1,000 people to come to a Harley-Davidson dealership, so Harley has a benefit because there are people at the dealership. I can do a great free workout to anybody that's ever thought about possibly, being part of a Spartan race. They get a free t-shirt. They meet everybody who's there, sort of get a flavor of the brand. That, in my mind, is a win-win situation. And I'd rather invest in the DJ and the photographer and the t-shirts and everything that goes with that than just pounding more money into Facebook and hoping that somebody is going to buy.
It's so interesting because lots of conversations with B2B marketers who, we had Ann Loons, who's the CMO of Adobe and very big advocate of digital for a long time. And when she got to Adobe, she said, how come we're spending so much on events? And then she sort of looked at it and realized, oh my God, this is really, really important to the business. And more CMOs I've talked to, and I think it's somewhat to do with because we spend so much time digitally not connecting with people, that events are very powerful. So this experience that you're describing, I think, bringing people together, fills a void that your product fills, but also these micro experiences fill. All right, I wanted, before we wrap up, you came in originally to do Spartan Woman, and I think that's really interesting. Talk a little bit about what you're trying to do there and why you needed a sub-brand. Why not just Spartan? Why have a Spartan Women?
Yeah, so interesting. When I came in, we looked at the split between male and female, and I had been to a few conferences and just talked that I'm doing consulting with Spartan, and people immediately said, well, I don't know, it looks really hard. So I suggested to Joe DeSena, the CEO, this is the feedback, and he immediately said, oh, why don't we just do women's only races? Let's do one, in a few months. And I put my Interbrand hat on and said, well, I would love to do a few focus groups and really understand if that's what people want. And the response was really overwhelming, and it was the other way. People are saying, do not do a women-only event. That's offensive because we don't wear pink clothes and have padded helmets and run the course. We want to be there right alongside men. We want to compete with and against our friends, husbands, whatever it is. And so we then very quickly thought, okay, it's not that the event itself is the challenging part. It's more the communication. And we've, with a predominantly male-focused senior leadership team and sort of that angle as the brand was growing up, it definitely was seen as being more male. And so we looked at every touch point, our communications. We built a Spartan Women Instagram account to really feature some of the women more, but definitely then also had that impact our main Instagram accounts. But funny enough, when we then said, hey, we've now built this audience, we want to now almost have a 50-50 balance on the main Instagram account, our community came back and said, no, we love this. We love this place. We have a lot of Facebook groups, and we have a lot of activations that we're really trying to do that are more female focused. So key is really to communicate that this is a co-gender platform, that women are treated equally, and that women compete. I myself, after I did these interviews or focus groups, I found myself on a course and I saw a really big, muscly guy sitting on a bucket in the bucket carry. And I sort of thought to myself, yeah, it does feel good that there are certain obstacles where you can outrun guys, and obviously vice versa. So it's a good platform to really see that not one body type will win. And you can, find your own strength, and you compete with and alongside men. So,
interesting. Well, what I heard was the need for diversity at the highest level. We've had lots of conversations about that in the show, but also heard, and this is so important, you get what you think is a good idea. It doesn't hurt to talk to the customer to make sure. So, and there's this very fine line in your brand between macho and sort of old guy versus gritty and, hey, women welcome. And it's a very interesting line because Spartan feels so, you have this picture of, the Spartans who were all male warriors. And so it's really a very fine line that you walk. Okay, so
the women of Sparta were always very empowered. And I think when you do come to our races, it is very mixed. And there's definitely no machoism going on. I feel like men and women are very much treated equally. And we do have a female pro team. And yeah, women are very much on par with men at Spartan.
All right. Got it. So as we wrap up this show, what do you think are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned as a result of your experience, now having shifted from brand side to client side?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest learnings as well as ongoing, projects is the fast lane and the slow lane. And how do you create a fast lane where you can always tackle? And, I recently got advice from a mentor of mine of always having these stand-up meetings, 10-minute meetings, and you very quickly huddle. There's only one topic that can be discussed, and everybody goes away and does something that gets implemented immediately. And how do you have lots of those, but then still that gap between your desk and your chair where you can actually think? How do you create time to think? And I feel like in a very executional business that we're in, it is sometimes difficult because my list of things to do for today is so long that when do I actually take a step back and think about what's going to move the needle long term? And how do I build all these different businesses that may or may not immediately impact revenue, but long term are going to position us as a leader and are really going to push the brand forward?
Interesting. I think about it this way, is that if it's not on my calendar, it's not a priority. And so if you really want to put think time into your agenda, you just have to put it on the calendar, and you just have to get your team to respect it. So that's interesting. I'm wondering if you have, just as we wrap up, 2 do's and a don't for your fellow CMOs.
I think my don't is definitely emails. I think email people are stealing your time because they just effectively block time in your calendar because now you have the email that you have to go through. So how do you optimize that you don't feel obliged to have to get back to every email? And I'm trying to work more in Slack with my internal team and then have email much more for external partners. And the do's, I think, definitely to customers and employees are most important. I think nothing works without a great team. And oftentimes you forget, those are the people that are not necessarily in the board level conversations. And you really need to spend time and understand, what makes them tick? Why are they even there? They don't own the company. They don't necessarily own all the shares. So how do you think about translating what makes me come to work every day to everybody in the team? And I recently just sort of started more of these informal sessions where also, I am on the podcast. I do a lot of interesting things. How does that now get translated? And how does the same opportunity exist for everybody on my team? So definitely spend more time with my team. And then secondary, it has to be customers. And, I have kids, I have a family. I can't be at every race every weekend, where I obviously could also speak to racers. But, making that time and always having a customer chair at every conversation that you have, where you think about, well, what would the customer say? So many times I find ourselves sitting in a room and thinking about, this is a great offer, this is that. Like, how about testing that? How about just putting it out there and seeing what people are going to say? And we have the luxury as a brand that has so many avid followers. You might get a biased view if you just talk to those that are obviously self-selecting and speaking, but it's better than nothing. It's better than just sitting in our offices and hypothesizing.
So I think this entire episode is really about why. And the power, I know the B2B CMOs are listening right now and going, okay, well, the Spartan, it's racing and it's macho and it's fun. And it's not macho, it's gritty. And you're thinking, how does this relate to me? Well, let's start with the fundamental notion that you have a clear purpose. If you have a clear purpose, you have a way of motivating your employees. You have a way of building community. You have a way of extending that, so much so that other brands want to borrow that, and that you could actually get promoted in an organization because you adopted this purpose. So I think we could wrap everything up into the why. And I want you to, as you leave today and sort of continue on your drive or your workout, hopefully you're working and preparing for your next race, you think about, what is our company why? How are we making a difference in the world? How are we making a difference in the lives of our employees? Because I think that will really ultimately be the most powerful thing a CMO can bring to the organization. And with that, I will thank you so much, Carola, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. That's great.
And for all of you listeners, thank you for sticking with us. And until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.